I know that there is nothing more human than being human. And that maybe sounds so simple. I'd say if you're a writer out there and you're trying to think about what to write and you are even hearing yourself say nobody would want to hear that, then your own self-critic is already limiting you.
It's true. The stories we are most afraid to tell are often the ones that need to be heard the most. When our friend first suggested Tanmet Sethi to do a TEDx talk, she felt uncomfortable and questioned, who wants to hear about this? I can't go on the stage and talk about this painful thing. In our interview, Tanmet shares the courage it took to share the story of a little boy being diagnosed with a rare disease that will end his life sometime in the next few years. It's in the mess, in the truth, where we find our deepest connection to each other. This courage helped her to make a dream come true and being featured by Oprah with her self-help book, Joy is My Justice. So if you've ever questioned whether your story is worth telling, afraid to share the hardest parts, the bad things, or you want to know how to get on stage and talk on a TEDx stage, this is for you. Tanmet, I found you on Substack Notes, Substack's internal social media network, and I remember that you shared like a powerful moment about your life, similar to the one you shared a few days back about your boy dreaming of playing basketball. In this Substack note you shared, this morning, my son told me that he dreamt he was playing with the school basketball team. He smiled as he looked up at me. I love them. I would play with them if I could. My son is in a wheelchair. He will never walk again, but he feels joy. So, Tanmet, this note says so many things about you. I think this is like everything your book, your Substack, your life is all about. I guess the most important question here, what is the story all about and what does joy mean for you?
When I was 9 months pregnant with my third child, I really felt like life was so wonderful. I was so excited. And that's when I found out, actually, that's when my life shattered, that my second child, the son that I'm referring to in that note, was diagnosed with a degenerative neuromuscular disease that is fatal. And it's like an ALS in children, if people are familiar with that disease. But really, everything fell apart then for me. I mean, that's not how I envisioned my mothering to be, my motherhood and my experience. And also, pertinent to your question, I thought I would never be happy again. I really didn't think it was possible. How could a mother be happy when her child is dying in front of her? And what I really found out was that I was right and I was wrong. I was right that I'm not that happy, but I was wrong that happiness is not the same as joy. Joy is very different. And that understanding and that realization of how joy is different, how to find joy, how to really find it in your body, how the neuroscience backs that, really allowed me to find fundamental deep change for my patients and myself, and really understand that when the constructs of the world or your life are not happy, you can still find joy. And not only can you still find it, it is critical that you do.
I know that you say, for instance, that joy comes in many forms, sometimes in the very same form as pain. And with the online writing club, I know that also like writing and being consistent in writing is very painful. Can you share more about this? Because this stuck with me. I watched several of your YouTube videos and you always like referring to the sentence. So can you share a bit more about this? Sometimes the very same form as the pain, as joy.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on is so important because particularly for writers, I think that sometimes, writing can be so challenging. It can feel really hard. We can feel stuck or blocked, or we can feel even more like we have nothing to say, that what we're saying is not important. And so then we can tend to actually distract ourselves from it, go into an escape from it, think we're not good enough. And what I'm saying about life is really pertinent to writing is that if you can be with what you're feeling, with the pain, with the challenge, if you can actually be with it and accept it instead of resisting it, you actually find more of a free flow. That is true about life and writing. You can find that it comes out much more easily. You can feel, for instance, Christina, you read that note that I wrote, and I think somebody could feel like, I don't want to write about this because somebody might feel sad about it, or somebody might feel like this is too depressing. And what I would say is that if we can understand that all the pain in our life is actually so human that other people will resonate, there will be someone who will resonate with that, then more of our writing would come out into the world if we stop judging and, pre-editing it in a way.
I remember that you also in your TEDx talk, you said that you reached out to like a former mentor and you told her your story and that you felt like so depressed about everything and that she then, recommended to like embrace the pain and be grateful for pain. How can we, be grateful for feeling this pain in this moment?
If you remember, I was really upset about that. I think what people don't understand is that gratitude is very different than the contrived gratitude that is pushed on us. I agree. You do not need to be grateful for your pain. In fact, you should never feel forced to find gratitude or positivity in anything. What I am saying is that no matter what the pain is that's present, we have the capacity and the right to still find the indestructible goodness that lies in the world right next to it or within ourselves. That's very different than finding gratitude for our pain.
And you managed somehow, although you went through so many things in your life, you managed to write yourself a book, Joy is My Justice, Reclaim What Is Yours. How did it feel, to go through this process from like zero to publishing your book for you then?
I know it feels really unbelievable, honestly, because I think sometimes when we're in the midst of a challenging situation, we just don't think we could ever get to that point. But it felt really important to write it. It felt really important because what would happen, and I think this is true for any of your writers, Christina, I think everyone should understand that if people are always asking you about something, there is a story there that needs to be heard. Right. And people were continually asking me exactly what you just asked. How could you find joy in the middle of such tragedy? How could you even dare to find that? And what you'll find is that if enough people ask you about something in your life that is that important, that means that that story needs to be heard. People want to understand it more. People want to be with you on the journey. And that is really what happened is I realized after answering it over and over that that wasn't enough, that maybe I needed to write more about it. And so, I think that for writers, often we can think that something we say over and over might be too simple that everyone understands it. But I would say if you're talking about it over and over, that means it needs to be written about.
Yeah, and you should definitely like repeat your core message over and over. So when I'm seeing your notes on Substack, I also thinking you're repeating the same things, but they are so important and they drew me in every day. And I know that you like learned this. So the book is not like the end of everything. It's like also like the beginning of everything because there was someone who inspired you to get on stage and embrace your vulnerability. You've never thought you would do this. So I watched the interview you had with Drew Ramsey, the psychiatrist, and he was the one who suggested you to do this TEDx talk in Seattle. So he said to you, it's not about this and that. It's not about your career and everything you have accomplished. It is really about embracing your vulnerability and sharing more about your son and gratitude. And I know that you felt uncomfortable and you questioned, you said, who wants to hear about this? I can't go on the stage and talking about this painful thing. And I know from the online writing club and from talking with so many people and writers that this is like the number one thing. Who would want to hear about this? I can't do this. Now, after all these years, what do you tell people about this special moment where Drew came to you and said, you have to talk on stage, you have to give a TEDx talk, and I also gonna like recommend you?
I think that, when I look back, you're right. I was very scared. I questioned it. I tried to change the TED Talk even a couple of months before I tried to change it. And I mean, the TED Talk coaches were like, what are you thinking? I know, Christina, that there is nothing more human than being human. And that maybe sounds so simple, but I think that the more we mask what really needs to be written, I'd say if you're a writer out there and you're trying to think about what to write and you are even hearing yourself say nobody would want to hear that, then your own self-critic is already limiting you. And I would say to really look at that very closely because there's probably the magic is right there. And, people say, how can you be so vulnerable? And I now say, how can I not? Because now, once you meet your life in that way, you can see how much you were masking, how much you were not letting people into. Now, let me tell you, there's obviously, you have to protect yourself. You have to also only go to what you feel comfortable with. But I would say for all the writers that are listening, go one step more, a little, just push yourself a little. You don't have to go to the full thing right away, but push yourself a little because your magic is waiting. This life is too short. And if we can't be vulnerable about our lives, then we're not living them fully.
And was this similar to the things that Drew shared with you? Because I know that you were like befriended before, or you had like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And was this similar to the pep talk that Drew gave you back then to, inspire you to get on stage and talk about what happens in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I remember distinctly saying to him, do you think anybody wants to hear about that? And he said, I think that is what everyone needs to hear.
Oh.
And I didn't really believe him at the time. So if you don't believe me, I get it. I would say that, vulnerability is thrown around a lot now. People talk about it a lot, like, being vulnerable is a strength. And I think that's very true. I think in our writing is actually more consumable and relatable the more we show people that we're just like them.
If this story resonated with you, this is your chance to going deeper. You can meet Tanmet Sethi inside the online writing club membership for an exclusive masterclass on how to embrace vulnerability in your writing so you can share your most powerful and authentic stories. How did you go from Drew, inspiring you with this pep talk to getting on stage?
Yeah. Well, he nominated me and I didn't know how it works. So for anyone out there who's dreaming of doing that, he nominated me and then they got in touch with me. That being said, I've learned since then that it is very common to nominate yourself. And so if anyone's listening and actually wanting to do a TEDx talk, I really didn't understand that it's very similar to pitching yourself to any media and that there actually need speakers, So if you have a succinct idea that you want to speak about, I would just nominate yourself. And if you feel uncomfortable doing that, have a mentor or a colleague or someone who knows you well nominate you. I didn't realize how self-led it could be because I think before I did a TED Talk, I thought of it as some unreachable moment. And I really think it's more reachable than people think.
Did Drew, was he already like on stage before so he could then recommend you or nominate you? Or what was his like position back then?
He's a pretty well-known integrative psychiatrist and he has books out and has a kind of a larger platform. So I think maybe that helped. I know many people who've given TED Talks since then who didn't have someone nominate them. So I would say go for it.
Tanmet, I'd also love to know, what did you discover about the root of your fear?
What I learned is that, about myself is that in my family culture, we don't talk about bad things and hard things. We try to, get through them. It felt very fearful for me to go against that and to get on a stage and plastered on YouTube forever talking about my child dying and, what I was feeling about that. That felt very anti my family, what I had learned, through being in my culture. And so it took a lot of me trying to decide, it's time for me to change that. I think that there's a lot of those blocks for writers. We carry our family with us. We carry our culture and what we've learned from our family or our broader culture. And sometimes that blocks us being able to express ourselves. And so, I know it doesn't sound fun to explore remember that ancestry and those cultural beliefs, but actually it is very freeing. And that's what allowed me to go on the stage and say, no, it's time to change that belief. And that felt very freeing and empowering. And the same way that if you write something or speak about something that is not usual for your culture or your family, it isn't that you're a rebel. It is that you've decided that it's time to change that story. You're rewriting that story. So I think that was really powerful for me.
And how much time did you had to spend into like narrowing your focus on what to say on stage, because you only had like 9 to 10 minutes on stage?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
how did you do this? How was like the process from getting like this recommendation from Drew and then starting to write, of course, the script or the speech for your TEDx talk?
So once you get accepted, then I wrote my draft. They have specific TEDx speaker coaches assigned to every TED event. And those coaches meet with you periodically to go over your draft, to pare it down. Everyone's draft is too long, too windy, and too complex. They pare it down with you first in written form, and then you practice it in speaking form. And they really get you to pin it down and down. So, what I originally wrote was much bigger than what I said on stage, meaning much more, but you can't do that. They really help you pin it down to one idea.
And did like sharing all these bad things that were happen in your family and in your life, did these change also the relationship you had with your family, with your parents?
Yeah, in a way, they don't talk about it very often because we don't talk about hard things, but they are very proud of me. They even say to me things like, "We're not like you. We don't talk about things the way you talk about them." I think it's hard for them and also very proud for them to see their daughter managing. In general, they always tell me how much they admire how I navigate life with this tragedy in my family. And so I think they're, growing to understand that I'm very different from them and that there might be a gift in that.
And I know that your TEDx talk had the title 2 words that can change your life. So tell us, what are these two words there?
Yeah. Thank you. And so it was really about learning to be thankful and turning towards our life instead of away from it. That when we say thank you for something, we actually in that moment, shed the resistance to resisting what is. And we come to our life instead of trying to escape it. And so, I think if you're writing, I use it often. I don't know if you do this, Christina, but I write very often, not only for my Substack, but I'm also working on more longer form writing. And some days it feels like, I just can't do it, or it's nothing's coming. And, then I can get frustrated. But instead, if I just say, thank you or express gratitude that I am able to have this opportunity to write, and that whatever could come might come later, I feel more, you can feel it in your body. You just relax into it instead of going up against a concrete wall trying to make it come out. And invariably, it flows better after that. I think because when we're vulnerable, we accept ourselves more. We embrace ourselves more. And when we do that, we activate our own self-compassion and it connects us to others. It reminds us of our common humanity that, Christina, you and I both may be so different and may live in different places and come from different cultures. But at the core of it, we are connected by commonalities of fears of not being enough, of wanting to be accepted, of wanting to succeed, of wanting to be loved. These are all core things to all of us as being human. And when you accept that you are scared or that you are frustrated or angry or sad, you're accepting that you are part of the greater human fabric, right? And so you really walk into your story instead of trying to create a fake one outside of it.
What do you think about, building connections in this world that often feels so disconnected in regards to, sharing our story, sharing vulnerability with the world?
I mean, I think it's everything. And here's what I would say to any writer who's wondering about how or why to do this, is that if you write from your heart, if you write vulnerably, what you do is connect and open up someone else's heart. So that reader then is reading your writing in a much more open way than if they're reading it with their head. This is basic neuroscience also, but what happens is if people open their hearts and accept in your story that way, their whole body, their nervous system settles, they get more clarity, they are more connected, they release oxytocin and connect to you, they will remember your story more. There is a lot of reasons why our writing can connect us. And if we stay in the only cognitive, non-vulnerable, descriptive writing, there's a mix. You just make it a mix. But if we stay up here only, then we never meet people down here at their heart center. And actually, it's very hard to connect. But if we can open up about ourselves, then other people are more open to receive us. So if there's any way in your writing, whether it be short or long form, if you can add your element of yourself in there and be vulnerable, even especially about your challenges or your failures, people will receive and remember you far deeper than they would have before.
If you would be talking to a writer, what would be your recommendations, or what are you seeing on Substack that really draws you in, where you're saying, wow, I have to read this, I love it? Have you any advice for writers, how to write and how to express themselves and how to, tap into our hearts and not into our brains?
I see this a lot. It's a really good question. I feel like I click on a Substack or a story when I feel some resonance, like we're talking about. Let's say if I were writing about guided imagery, it's a very powerful tool. It's a powerful tool for pain, for immune system, all this stuff. Okay. It's very powerful. If you see me writing about it and just describing how powerful it is, that's interesting, but maybe you pass it over. If you see me explaining it in the context of my son, sometimes will say before going to bed that he's so sad he'll never run again. And that makes him very sad. And sometimes I ask him to just close his eyes and that we imagine him running together. And we go into that imagery together. And then if I describe what that does for he and I, even now as we're talking, can you feel the difference between me saying it that way and then going into it versus guided imagery is a very useful tool. Studies have shown that it's very good. People will say to me often, I don't have a story or I don't have anything like that to talk about. I first of all disagree. I think everybody has a story because everybody walks through the day scared, sad, anxious, or fearful at some moment or the other about something. And that's what makes you really human. And so even if it's that you're expressing your humanity about something you're writing about or about the world, that's a story. And then it draws me and the reader in. I think that anytime you can put yourself in there, because look, the truth is you're writing it. So we know you wrote it and it's your opinion or your writing. But if you bring yourself into it more, then I feel like I'm with you instead of writing what you wrote. I'm not looking at what you wrote, I'm with you. And so I think that if anybody is writing and trying to gain more readers or connect, and what I think is the most beautiful thing about Substack is connecting and having impact. That's what I've enjoyed the most. If you want that, then really you want to put your humanity into it. And your full humanity is not just success and being good at something. In fact, I would say that is not it at all. It is the full continuum of all of it, of what is hard about it too.
Don't try to be vulnerable, just be real. Meet Tanmet Sethi inside the Online Writing Club membership for an exclusive masterclass on how to embrace vulnerability in your writing. If, for instance, if we're going with the example of Substack as a platform, with Substack Notes, I think this is like the place where everyone meets, the writers meet the writers, and we also meet our readers, and they can find you. This is a cool thing. And there is really the place where you can share everything you want. And I also love that if there is a trend going on, or I don't know, maybe you want to share your political opinion, whatever, you can always add your 2 cents to what's going on in the world right now or how you're feeling. And also what I'm seeing on Notes, which I love, is that people, for instance, they share their grief. So for instance, one of the tribe members, her dog died, and she said he went over the rainbow bridge, and so many people could relate to this. This went viral, and so many people shared pictures.
That note.
You saw this, yeah, from Robin Wilding.
Yes.
And she was like, what's going on? I can't reply to all these people. This is amazing. Usually she's like a humor writer. And with this one, it was like sharing a bad things that happened in her life, and so many people could relate. And they started, as you know, sharing photos of their dogs and so on. The same as if you're, for instance, sharing grief about the death of your parents or of your son
Yeah.
or your daughter. I'm seeing a lot of these like grief stories, these mini anecdotes, mini memoirs on Substack notes, and they connect, even if this is not the story of your Substack newsletter, but it connects.
Yes.
And this way you connect on a deeper level than just like your newsletter, which might then be a bit more like professional or more like brain stuff than this hard stuff.
I love that. And one thing that you're hitting on that I think about and I've been talking about lately with people, because they're saying, well, why, if my note has nothing to do with my Substack, then that doesn't, like, it almost feels to them like it's not fair to write about that, or it's not a good way to gain readers. And what I would say is that, first of all, I think notes are a service to readers, but I don't think of it as cringy. I think of it as a way to connect and serve. But secondly, I would say that even if your note has nothing to do with your Substack, remember, it has everything to do with you. And so people not only want to know about your Substack, they want to know who you are. And that is what I'm talking about your humanity. If there's no actual human to connect with behind the Substack, I don't think those Substacks are that interesting. To me, at least, they're not, because I don't know who's writing them. Think of it as, is this note connecting people to my Substack in an ideal way, or is it connecting them to me? Both are valid. And I would say to go with it. Don't think of it as, it's not a fake thing. It's a way for people to know you.
Yeah, and the same goes for this feature with live streaming. So we can now do this Substack Lives, and I love it because you can then use it as a collaborative tool, which I love. It's not about me all the time. It's more about, for instance, we could go live and talk about whatever, for instance, storytelling and the power of embracing your vulnerability, something like this. And then people could join us, they could ask questions. And I love this magic going on there because it's really about all these connections and collabs. And I also know that you got featured by Oprah, that this was like one of your dreams to one day get featured by Oprah. You got featured by Oprah Daily from Oprah Daily, and in this like blurb, she shared there was this moment in front of me is always the one where I feel most vibrantly alive. So I love this with the moment, and you also shared in one of your interviews that if someone is depressed and maybe even has already like suicidal ideation, you're helping them to get from one moment to the next and then fight for the next moment, which I love. So, fight for this moment, because once you see how beautiful the world can be, even with all the pain and everything that's going on in the world right now, you can live for these specific moments. I love this. Could you share more about like the power of the moment?
I think this is where people get confused a lot about toxic positivity, because they get told a lot like, you'll be okay, make this moment better, think good things, or all this. And it's actually, I don't agree with that. It's very toxic. It's actually harmful to your nervous system. I write about that in my book. But what it really is about understanding that each moment is part of your human gift to be here. And so, when I'm really sad or a moment is so horrible, I don't say, no, it's okay. I just say it's horrible. And I also, honestly, but this is because I've practiced it for so long, I also feel grateful that I'm human and alive enough to recognize that. If I am crying so hard in a moment, then I haven't lost yet. I haven't lost my humanity. I'm still here. We weren't meant to be always happy or always joyous. We were meant to be here and live each moment. And so, if you see each moment as a gift, and sometimes gifts are really hard and not fun, then life becomes more of an opportunity than something to endure and suffer through. And so, it's like Viktor Frankl always said when in his writings, he said, that suffering without meaning is just suffering. And I really agree with him. I think if we can make meaning out of every moment, then we are not suffering, we are living. And so, this is really important for us to understand because we often think very binary. Life is either very good or it's very bad. And I just don't feel that.
I know that with your Substack newsletter, you're having like this tagline where you're saying it's the doctor's visit you always wished for in your inbox. So Tanmet, tell us a bit more about your Substack newsletter, because this seems to be now like everything together. Your TEDx talk, your book coming together in your newsletter.
It's called Your Integrative Physician. And yes, it's the doctor's visit you wish for because I'm really empowering people with science-based integrative medicine advice that they can do to improve their lifestyle and their health, right? So there's so many things we can do, from the food we eat to the way we move, to the way we think, the way we settle our nervous systems, supplements, the way we control our blood sugar. There's so many things you can do without the doctor and that you can really feel empowered. This world is quite challenging. No matter what you think about the world or what side you are on, I don't even mean that. I just think it's challenging. And if we can take back control and power in our health and invest in it, we can feel better every day. And so really that's what I'm trying to give my subscribers. And, the healthier the collective is, the healthier we all are. So I'm hopeful. I love being on Substack and I love forming community there.
Talking about collective, I know that you run your own nonprofit to find a cure for like this ASL or this Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
Yes.
Your son is suffering. It's called Zubin's Wish.
Yes.
And could you tell us a bit more about this? Do you also like donate some money to this nonprofit, or how? I don't know. Maybe you've connected your newsletter maybe somehow to this nonprofit. I don't know.
I haven't yet, but what a good idea, Christina.
There are some people also in my tribe who are donating the money.
Yeah, that's a good idea. My nonprofit funds research for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which my son has, and it's 100% fatal right now. So we're working on a cure. And so that's what my foundation does. It's a small foundation. It's, it's just me because I want 100% of the money to go where it needs to go. So I don't have any overhead or any salaries or anything like that. But it's a good idea to link it at some point. I haven't thought of doing that.
Like that, subscribe to the Online Writing Club and share this interview with a friend who needs to hear this today. I also know that you live in Seattle, so I know Seattle only from Sleepless in Seattle. I don't know, have you ever watched, I know, so America for me, I've been to Hawaii for my honeymoon. I've been to New York also for my honeymoon. What is it like to live in Seattle? Have you ever lived there in Seattle, or did you move there? And does it have to do something with Sleepless in Seattle? Like, what's the vibe of Seattle at the moment?
I haven't always lived here. So I moved here as an adult. It's a beautiful, beautiful area, this Pacific Northwest of the country. It's full of water and mountains and greenery. It does rain a lot in the winter. That's why people don't like it. But it's not as bad as they think. But I don't want everyone to know that because then everyone comes here. But it's beautiful. And we're surrounded by nature. And it's so calming to me to have water and mountains around me everywhere I look. So it's a really special place. It's also a very big birthplace of coffee. So people know us for coffee. It was the most, and I don't know if it still is, the most populous writer population in America. So the most writers per percentage live here. And it must be good writing weather, the rain or something. But we have a very vibrant writing community. And I love that. So lots of authors, lots of creators, and lots of writing festivals and things happening. So it's a really fun place for that.
Cool. And are you connected with these writers then in Seattle? So like in real life? too?
Yeah, yeah. And even more so since my book, I've really met a lot of new authors. And so it's really nice to have an author community. I used to have a writing community way back when I first started writing, and that was really fun. But then as I had children, I lost, touch with them and the ability to meet with them so often. And so now this is my recultivating of that community, and it's been really nice.
Do you have the feeling that Seattle just like makes you start writing something like this?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I will say it's easier to write on a rainy day than a sunny day, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because you don't feel like you're missing anything, you
Yeah,
can't go out.
it's the same. Yeah,
So
it's the
I think
same.
the climate is conducive to writing. I do think so. And we have amazing writing retreats here. And I mean, it's a wonderful place for authors and writers. So it's
Mm.
really nice.
And are you also thinking about like offering a writer retreat or something?
I haven't thought about that. You have lots of good ideas.
Yeah, this could be something for you.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I've done a lot of writing workshops for other doctors, but I haven't thought of that. Yeah, that's something to think about. There's too many good things to think about.
Yeah, so many things I know, and just like today to do something. So this is always the thing here. Yeah, I love it so much. And is there like one activity you love the most doing with your kids? Can you do something with all of your three kids?
It's become less that we can go out and do things together because of my son. We do a lot of games. We play a lot of games together, and that's really fun. So we love finding new board games and puzzle games and doing that together. And I love them as young adults. It's fun to hear their opinions and talk to them about life and the world. It's very different than when they were little.
What would you recommend anyone who is saying, okay, there is definitely this story inside me, but I can feel it, but I don't feel ready, and I don't know how to get it out. What's like your recommendation? Do you have like a mindset training or something, or an imagination training or something we can do?
Well, I would say that first to keep writing about it. So that actually pumps the muscle of being able to tell our story, and just write it for yourself. Just keep writing. And then as you're ready, find the safe people that you feel safe sharing it with. Maybe they're people who already you think know your story and you feel like you can share some with them. And then that will help you share with others. Just keep pushing yourself, but push yourself safely. I understand why people are scared, but we can just keep expressing it. I think the more you write it, the more you'll be able to tell it. And so, storytelling really starts there in our writing of it. And I think that we think, honestly, Christina, I bet you, I mean, we're all human. I bet you would have experienced this. We think that people who know us know, quote unquote, know our story. I disagree. I think people don't really know until you share with them parts of it. There are people who know me so well who found out things in my book, right? Because I haven't talked about that thing like that with them. And so, there are ways that we can just practice and safer and little safer and then get a little safer. Feeling safe is a muscle we can practice.
Maybe you know The Affair from HBO, the series. I was
Oh, I
inspired by
don't know
this.
it.
That's why I
No.
came to New York City, and I had to see Long Island because of this series, because it really told the story from different perspectives, and everyone had a different perspective, And this is what I loved about it. So you never knew exactly what was going on, what was like real, what really did happen there. And do you see this also in your daily practice?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, especially when hard things happen in families. If you ask a family on a very hard day in the past of a bad diagnosis or a death or whatever, if you ask each member of the family what happened, it sounds different from each member every time, what they remember it as happening. And sometimes you're not sure which one is right. What you're saying just reminded me of one other thing is that when you do share your story with others, I do think it's important to say what you're hoping for from them. We can expect something, but it might not be what people want. So what I mean is, if you're sharing a part of your story and all you want is practice sharing it and you don't want any feedback or advice, say that. I'm just sharing this with you, but I don't want you to give me any advice. I just want you to hear it and receive it. Or maybe you want to say, after you hear this, it would really help me if you tell me how it hit you in your heart, or how it received, or whether you say what you want, because people don't know, when you share bigger things with them, they don't know what they're supposed to do. And you feel less safe if you don't get what you were hoping for in the format you were hoping for.
Yeah, I think this is important if we can talk, but if we are writing, we always somehow get feedback on our story. We
Yes,
have to
yes,
keep
for
this in
sure.
mind if we're sharing our stories. And maybe one more thing, I call it always like this soul striptease. So do you know this, like soul striptease? There are some writers who think that they can grow faster by sharing like really dark moments of their life, and maybe at some
Ah.
point also regret that, or maybe also with Medium I saw this, then they delete their stories, or they move the whole content and to their own blog and put it behind the paywall, something like this. What do you think about this, like this soul striptease, that people have the feeling they have to share like so many like dark moments and bad moments of
Oh,
their
wow.
lives?
Yeah, I've never
Yeah.
heard that term. That's so interesting.
Yeah, in Germany it's like a Seelenstriptease. I don't know, it's like just how I translated it, like soul
Yeah,
striptease. I'd call it
it
like
makes
this.
sense. It makes sense. I don't think that's true, that you have to share every dark moment. And in fact, I think that it can become performative in that way. So I think that you share as you're ready, you share as you're wanting. And I think what you brought up is a really important point. Paywalls can be very helpful for people who are worried about sharing. I think that paywalls do provide some more safety of a community who's invested. I mean, I've had trolls on Substack. You can really protect yourself a little more. So if you have a paywall and you're wanting to share something a little more personal, I think that's a really fair place to do it first and give yourself some safety of that smaller community.
Yeah, Danvin, thank you so much for joining. It was delightful talking to
Oh, it
you.
was so good to be with you. I really enjoyed it, Christina. Thank you.
Subscribe and check out my other writing interviews and tutorials.